Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest Code Presents webinar, Git Basics, knowledge you need to develop important Git skills. We're excited to have longtime Code magazine author Sahil Malik presenting today, and we're looking forward to learning what we need to effectively use Git in our software projects. Sahil's presentation today is directly related to his January-February Code magazine article. I've included a link here if you want to refer to the article during the presentation. My name is Jim Duffy, and I'm responsible for the marketing and sales efforts for all of our Code services, including Code Magazine, of course. But Code is so much more than just a magazine. Code's continuing mission is to help people build better software. We're a Microsoft partner and provide a number of services under the Code brand umbrella, including building custom software solutions for on-prem and in the cloud, modernizing legacy applications like Visual Fox Pro and Visual Basic 6, educating developers with webinars and training courses, providing developer resources to augment your development teams, as well as supporting and maintaining existing applications. Our team of expert developers and consultants are ready to help you with your project. Our free hour of Code is one of our most popular free services. It's a free hour on us. No strings, no commitment, no credit card required. Just free help from our Code experts. It provides an opportunity for you and or your team to meet with our experts to discuss anything you could use our help with. Slots are limited, so reach out to me today about getting your free hour of Code scheduled for you and your team. We are hiring React developers. Come join the Code consulting team. We have multiple junior and senior React positions currently open, remote and on-site. Full-time and contractor positions are available. Follow the link for all the details. Are you looking for a new gig? We're always on the lookout for talented developers to join the Code team. Check out our jobs page for all of our open positions. If you're interested in writing for Code Magazine, check out our Writing for Code page. Our Code staffing division can help you find the development talent you're looking for to augment your development teams. If you like what you see today, or have seen in our prior webinars, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Code Magazine is the leading software development magazine written by expert developers for developers. All registered attendees who don't already subscribe will automatically receive a free digital Code Magazine subscription. I've also included a free subscription link here for you to freely share with others who couldn't make it to the webinar. The Code mobile app is available for both iOS and Android. It's the ideal way to read Code Magazine on the go. We would like your feedback about this webinar in the form of a quick survey, and we're willing to pay $100 in the form of an Amazon e-card to one lucky attendee. A name will be drawn from the entire webinar's registered attendee list, and a completed survey is required to qualify for the e-card. If the selected name hasn't completed the survey, another name is selected, and so on. Fill out our very short survey, and don't be that one person whose name is selected only to lose out because you didn't complete the survey. Our survey link is on the slide, and we'll post the survey link in the chat window as well. Just a quick shout out here about Photino. Photino is an open source project the Code team is involved with that allows .NET developers to create native cross-platform desktop applications using web development technology. You can leverage your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript skills to create desktop applications that run on Windows, Linux, and the Mac. It's like Electron, only smaller and much lighter. Learn more at tryphotino.io. The slides and recording of today's webinar, and all our webinars, will be available on the Code Presents page on the Code website. All registered attendees will also receive an email after the event directing you to the slides in the webinar recording as well. Our presenter today is Sahil Malik. Sahil is a popular Code magazine author, an experienced software developer, a popular conference speaker, a Pluralsight author, and a former Microsoft MVP. If this is your first time attending one of our webinars, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. If you've attended one of our webinars in the past, welcome back. Okay, you've heard enough from me. Thanks for listening. Take it away, Sahil.
Hello everyone, my name is Sahil Malik and I'm a long-time Code magazine author. In this webinar, I'm going to talk about Git basics. Now, Git is a tool that no developer can run from. At least that's the situation today. And it is amazing how much assumed knowledge we take in this space. So I thought it would be fun to go through the very basics of Git, how to set it up, how to configure it, the various tips and tricks, just to get us started on Git if you've never used it before, or even if you have, maybe you'll find something new here. So let's get started. So what is Git? Here's the definition of Git. It is a free and open source distributed version control system designed to handle everything from small to very large projects with speed and efficiency. So the reason I like Git is because it gives me the power of source control, even if I'm working as myself, one developer on a machine. Sometimes I'm writing complex code and I just want to revert back to a previous version. I want to see how I progressed. Or maybe I'm working collaboratively and I want to record the steps as I move forward. And I want to work without boundaries with anyone across the world. So Git is very, very powerful, and it also can start very small. So it's very flexible. So that's personally why I like Git. Although yes, it can be confusing at times. So let's dive into what will be mostly a demo-oriented webinar with our first demo, which is that I'm starting on a clean machine. How do I go about installing it? The first thing we need to do to use Git on a machine is to install Git. So I'm on a Ubuntu machine, and the instructions for Windows and Mac will be slightly different. These instructions, you can find them on any search engine, but let me show you how I'll go about doing this on a Ubuntu machine. So here is my Ubuntu machine, and I am going to basically just run Git on terminal as if Git was installed. And it says Git is not installed. Now this is a plain vanilla installation of Ubuntu. I haven't done any major customizations yet, just did things like install VS Code and Chrome, but that's it. But it tells me how I can install Git. So I can just say sudo apt install Git like that, and it'll ask me for my admin password. Say yes, and that's basically it. It shows me a little wall of ASCII. Basically, it's telling me what it's doing. And in a moment, Git should be installed. So now if I type Git, Git runs. So Git is now installed. Obviously, we need to configure Git, and let's see that next. All right, so Git is installed. But installing it alone is not enough. In order for us to be a little bit more productive, let's configure the shell we will use. And how do you do some basic configuration on Git? Let's get started with that. Now, I like to use a shell called SSH. Why? Because while Git is now working, not configured, just working on my machine, the terminal here isn't showing me a lot of information, like even if I'm in a Git repo or not. So to do that, I like to use a shell called SSH with a theme called Agnoster. So this command line utility will tell me how to install SSH. So let's go ahead and run that. Here we go. Hit enter. And this should go ahead and set up SSH for me. Like that. There you go. So now that I'm in SSH, the next thing I need to do is that I need to modify a file called zshrc. So .zshrc. Let's go ahead and open this. Here we go. And here, look for something called as theme. I think it's called ZSH theme or something like that. It is here as uncommented here. That's what I need. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to Agnoster. This is the theme I like to use. And let's go ahead and hit X. Okay. And let's go ahead and reset my shell. And in order for me to use this particular theme, I'm also going to need a certain set of fonts. Now, these fonts are called as the Powerline fonts. So let's open another tab in Chrome and visit github.com/powerline/fonts like that. And here you see this particular repo has got a bunch of fonts. I am interested in some specific fonts that work very well with my theme. So I'm going to go ahead and copy paste this URL over here. And you can obviously do a quick installation. Actually, you know what? Let's do a quick installation. Why not? Copy And let's come back over here and let's hit paste and hit enter. Here we go. Now let's go back into my temp directory, and you see here that I'm beginning to see some Git integration over here. But in order for me to use that Agnostor theme, what I'll do is that I'll simply exit out of bash shell over here, and I will restart terminal. Here we go. And let's go ahead and increase the font size. Let's enter ZSH again. And now you see that it looks slightly different than before. I think it looks a lot better. This is the Agnostor theme in effect. And now if I go into that temp directory, it shows me proper Git integration. Specifically, it's telling me that I'm in a Git repo and I'm in a master branch. So let me go ahead and create a file over here. For example, test.txt, see the color changed. And now it is telling me that this is a file that has unstaged changes. So I can say git status like that. I can say git add dot like that. And I can say git commit. See the little that plus sign is telling me that I have added changes over here. So I can say git commit m and just enter something over here. Now obviously I have not fully yet configured this particular Git repo, so it won't let me commit. That makes sense, right? So let me go ahead and provide this configuration information. So how do I do that? Actually, it's telling me exactly what to do. So I'm going to say git config -- global user.email. So I've already set up a Git account. So I'm going to go ahead and provide this information. Now this information is like, think of it as me telling Git who I am. I could tell that I am Bill Gates at Microsoft.com, right? But obviously when I commit to an online repo, then there is authentication, etc. involved over here. Currently, I'm not pushing this to a central repo, so I'll just go ahead and provide some information over here. So this is my email address, and let me go ahead and also provide a user.name over here, like that. Okay, and now if I say git commit m, the commit works, right? So this is great. Now, one interesting thing over here is that this information that I provided, this actually goes in a directory or a file called gitconfig. So gitconfig sits in my root over here, and there are different levels of gitconfig you can create: operating system level, project level, or in my case at my profile. And that information that I provided, my email and my name, that goes over here. Of course, inside of git config, you can put a whole bunch of other interesting configuration as well. But at this point, my machine is set up to use Git locally. So Unix-based systems use this editor called VI, and VI is great because it will work through even SSH and in very limited UIs. There's some historical reasons why a lot of people use VI and they swear by it. Personally, I find it confusing to remember all those shortcuts that VI has. So I like to use something like, say, VS Code, especially if I'm on an operating system that does support a GUI. So let's see how you can change the editor, in my case, to VS Code. But you can use these instructions for any editor you want. So I have some basic Git configuration done on this machine. Let's talk further about Git configuration. So as I mentioned, that there is a file called gitconfig, and this file contains my configuration information. So let's configure this further. To work with the configuration of Git, you simply type git config, right? And then you specify the various details. The question is, well, how do I understand what does this command support? So one little trick with Git is that at any point you can type git -- help, and this will give you the basic help for Git. And if you wish to get detailed help about a certain command, you say git config -- help. So in this case, it'll give me help for the config command. So let me hit enter. And it tells you that there are these various things that Git configuration supports. You can do Git configuration at a global level or not. There's a lot of detail over here. You can read through here. But let me go ahead and do some basic configuration here. So one of the first things I like to do is that I don't like to use the VI editor, Vim. Why? Because, well, okay, sometimes I have to use Vim, right? Because let me show you what Vim looks like. So if I want to edit the configuration of my git config, I'm going to say vi git config. Actually, you should always say /, so there is no doubt which git config you're editing. So I'll be editing the one in my home directory. So let's hit enter. So this is what the VI editor looks like. Not bad. I can go ahead and start editing. I can hit I to insert and then type whatever I want to do, like what changes I want to make, and hit escape, shift Z to exit. The problem is that VI editor requires me to remember all these weird shortcuts. Sometimes you're SSH'd into a machine, you don't have access to GUI, graphical user interface, but that's not the case here. So I'd rather work with a nicer editor like VS Code. Now I do have VS Code installed here, so I'm just going to make a little configuration change. I'm going to say git config -- global. So this is a global editor, global change that we're making, core.editor. And I'm going to say code -- wait. So wait, code invokes code and VS Code, and wait is going to ask it to wait. Let's hit enter. Let's do cat git config one more time, see what it did over there. As you can see, it created a section called core, under which it created an entry called editor, and the value of that is code -- wait. Okay, so far so good. Now let's go ahead and look at the configuration. So I'm going to say git config -- global -e. So I wish to edit this global config now. Hit enter and watch what happens. VS Code launches, and now I can start making changes right here, which is great. So I have a nice user interface to work with. When I'm done with these changes, I'm going to X out of VS Code, and now I'm back on terminal. So this is how I can make VS Code as my default editor for Git configuration. So here's a Windows specific configuration that you should consider doing, which is configuring carriage returns on Git. Let's understand why you need to do that and how you do that. Now I'm recording this on a Linux machine, and on a Linux machine versus a Mac machine, it's going to be about the same because Mac is Unix based. But on a Windows machine, there is a specific configuration that you need to do. Let me talk about that, even though I won't do that configuration here. But if you are watching this from a Windows machine, there's something you need to know. So what happens in Windows is that when there is a file that has multiple lines of text, typically speaking on Linux and Mac, it'll look like this, line of text, okay? And when you want to go to a new line, you use a character called /n. /n is not a character that you'll see, but /n basically means that it's a new line character, right? In hex code, I think it's hex 13, I forget. But basically /n means new line. Now, in Mac and Linux, a new line of text is going to look like this. But in Windows, it looks slightly different. It looks like /r/n. /r stands for carriage return, which means not only are we going to a new line, we are also, think typewriters, that you would get a new line and then you want to go to the beginning of that line, so carriage return. That's the history behind it. The problem is that, what was done for typewriters and printers, we're stuck with it. This was a decision that Windows made way back in the 80s, and every line of text on Windows by default is /r/n, whereas on Linux and Mac it is just /n. This is not going to create a visual problem, but it does create a problem when you start checking in code and you are working with your coworkers, and the coworkers are on a Windows machine, and some of them are on Mac, and then you start diffing these files and you start seeing these /r's. It's a total mess. So what you need to do only on a Windows machine is you issue a command like this: gitconfig --global core auto crlf true. Okay, I'm not going to hit enter because on Linux I don't need this, but on a Windows machine, if you run this command, it is basically instructing Git to basically insert these /r's, and or rather it doesn't actually insert these /r's, it doesn't modify your code, but in fact it is basically accommodating for the differences between Windows and Mac, and it will go with the /n default. So that is one change you need to do on Windows. So Git has a concept of, let's call it a central branch, and the default name for that is master, and there are some historical reasons why that is the case. But you can choose to pick a word like, say, main, which is kind of becoming the standard. So how do you configure Git to use main, and how do you sort of remove friction if somebody's using main, somebody's using master? How do you default to using main going forward? Now, Git works in terms of branches. I haven't yet talked about branches. I will do so shortly. But when you initialize a Git repo, by default, you're going to get a branch called master. And the word master has some interesting connotations. So Git gives you the ability to say that when I create a new repo, the word master, I don't prefer to use that, so I wish to use a different word, like main. That is kind of becoming a standard now, that Git repos prefer to use main as the, call it the root branch or something like that. When I talk about branches, what master means, what main means will become clearer. But let's go ahead and create another config for now, which is basically instructing Git that we want to use the initial default branch as main. So I'm going to say git config global init default branch main. And this minor change, let's do git config. This minor change basically now means that when I create a new repo, the new repo's default branch will not be master, it'll be main. At the heart of Git are code repositories. That's where your code lives. So it's time for us to start creating a code repo and start using Git with a code repo. So I've done some basic Git configuration, enough to get me started on a local environment. Now let me go ahead and walk you through the process of creating a new repo, and we'll start examining the basics of how we can start using Git, at least locally. Okay, so I'm going to create a new directory called temp, and let's dive into that directory. And right now this is an empty directory. There are no hidden files, no tricks going on. And what I'm going to do next is that I am going to turn this directory into a Git repo. You simply type git init. Let me actually show you what version of Git I'm using as well. So if you don't see the word master, or rather if you don't see the word main appear here, if it still says master, you need to make sure that you're on version 2.25 or newer. Okay, so it says git -- version. This is the version, is turned it into a Git repo. Basically what it did is that it created a new folder called .git. Let's look at it. So the .git folder is the sausage factory. This is, think of it as internal to Git. If you delete that folder, it is no longer a Git repo. But what you shouldn't do is go into this folder and start modifying files by hand. This folder is for Git's use. It's there, leave it alone. Okay. Now, let's see what we can do here. Let's go ahead and create a new file. So I'm going to say create a new file. And what this is going to do is that it's going to create a new file called readme.md, and the contents of that readme.md is first file. Let's look at it like that. Indeed. Notice what just happened. Agnostic with ZSH, it is telling me that, see, the color changed. So it tells me that I'm on the main branch, and the color changed from green to yellow. So it's dirty now, right? There are unstaged changes over here. What are the changes that are there? So type git status and it'll tell you exactly what the unstaged changes are. You should think of Git. And remember, we're still working locally. We have not involved server side yet. So even pure locally, what you have to think is that Git is, there are three areas in Git that we need to worry about. So what you need to learn about Git is that there are three areas. Number one is your working area. Okay. This is where you're making changes. You're making lots of changes. You're really not sure if they're ready to be committed yet, right? Then you have a staged area. A staged area sits between the working area and the committed area. Committed area is like permanent. You want to put that in Git's history. You want to freeze those changes, right? And if you're working collaboratively, committed stuff that is pushed to a remote repo, I'll talk about that later, but basically commits is what you care about. Staged area is, think of it as like midway work that you don't want to lose. It is, like think of it this way, that you're shipping a product. Committed is that the product has been delivered, and staged is like the product is packaged, that you're ready to send it. And the third obviously is committed, right? So these are the three areas that you need to think about. So let me go back over here. What's going on here? Right now I have this readme.md, a new file. This is in my working area. In order to commit it, I need to first put it in the staged area. So I say git status, and it tells me that I'm on branch main, there are no commits yet, and I've got one untracked file. Okay, so I'm going to say git add dot. Okay, that basically means that all the changes here are going to be staged. You can choose to add individual files as well. That's quite typical. Let's say if I made a number of changes, some changes I want to stage and some I don't, I may want to do it file or directory level. So I'm going to say git add dot. Now this plus sign appears here. The plus sign is telling me that I have staged changes. Let's type git status one more time. Okay, so these changes are staged. They're not committed yet. Think of this as that the package is packed up, you put tape on it, is ready to go. You haven't shipped it yet. If I want to unpack it, I can type git rm cached whatever file, and I can unstage an individual file if that's what I want to do. Think of it this way, that I'm making changes and I can stage multiple times. But when I'm ready to actually ship this, I would say git commit. So let's commit. I'm going to say git commit, and I'm just going to hit enter. Watch what just happened. It popped open my editor. So the purpose here is that Git is saying that you really shouldn't be committing any changes unless you give good comments, right? So I'm going to say first commit. You can also give simple comments right on command line. I'll show you how to do that later. I'm going to say first commit. I save that. I'm going to exit my default editor, which is VS Code. And now the change is committed. See, my working tree is now clean. There are no more unstaged or staged changes. Everything is committed. I can type git status to verify that. Nothing to commit. Working tree is clean. And I can type git log to look at my log history. It tells me that at such and such time, the first commit was done by such and such user. Again, remember, everything is local, and now I can start making changes to my Git repo. So I've made my changes, I have a local repo, and I now want to push this to a central location. Question is, how does that central location authenticate me? A very common way that developers use to authenticate themselves to a central Git repo is by using SSH. So let's see how you can set up SSH with Git. So I'm in my Git repo, which is entirely local at this point. Well, that's not doing me much good because the whole idea behind Git is for developers to work collaboratively with each other, right? So how can we push this to a location, maybe online somewhere, something that supports the Git protocol, that multiple developers can work on this? Well, here's how. So there are many such services. One such service is github.com. I went to github.com and I created an account for myself called Malik Sahil Test. And I intend to create a repository here, okay? And I intend to push my code there. Now, before I can do that, there are certain Git commands I'll need to run, of course, but there's a question I have. When I run the command to push this repo online, the command is git push, how does my computer or me, how do I get authenticated to GitHub? How does it know that Malik Sahil is authenticating me, not somebody else? So you see there is this git config that we set up, or let's just do cat actually. Let's go here, cat git config. That alone is not enough to identify me. I need something more secretive. Here I can put whatever I want. So I need something a little bit more secretive. And there are some choices you have here. You can use username password, although that's not considered very secure. In fact, after I believe August 31st, 2021, GitHub has actually disabled username password. So that's not a choice. So you can use a personal access token, which is like a long string issued by GitHub. It's kind of like a username password. It's just a password, but slightly more restrictive. You can use SSH keys, which is like a public-private key pair, so admins can control it. That's a pretty good option as of now, and it's built into the Git protocol. Or you can use credential helpers, which are extra code that Git can depend on, and then you can extend it to whatever you want. Now, my dream is that one day you will have modern authentication working with Git, but as of now, that's not the case. So we will use SSH. So the first thing we need to do is that we need to generate a public-private key pair. So to do that, I'm on an Ubuntu machine. The commands on Linux and Mac are similar. So I'm going to say SSH keygen, what algorithm I want to use. So this is what GitHub likes, 25519. Give it my email address. So this is just my junk email address. I'm going to hit enter. All right, I messed this up. What did I do? So too many arguments. -C, capital C. Just a second. -C. Okay. So it is asking me where should I save this key. I'll just pick the default. It's asking me for a passphrase. Go ahead and enter a passphrase. Make sure you repeat it. And then it generates a public-private key pair for me. So if I go into this directory, .ssh, and I hit ls, here is where my keys are stored. You can make this hardware-backed as well. The instructions for that are slightly different, but we won't worry about that for now. I have something to get started with. There's one more thing I need to do. I need to provide this key to the SSH agent. So basically, when a program asks for it, the SSH agent can provide those for me. Let me open a new terminal command, or new terminal window rather. To do this, first let me enter sudo mode. So I'm going to say sudo -h. Let's enter password. Okay, so now I'm in sudo. So let's go ahead and exec SSH agent, ZSH. Okay, Let's get the PID just to make sure that it's running. So SSH agent -s like that. Okay. Now let's go ahead and add that key so it can be provided when anybody asks for it. So we're going to add that to the SSH agent. So I'm going to say SSH add, and we need to provide the full path. What is the full path? Let's grab the full path. Now I can't remember it, but let me show you where it is. Now it is in the home directory /SSH, but whose home directory? So I'm going to say pwd print working directory /home /Sahil Malik /.ssh, and then this. Okay, so don't make any typos here. Let's go back here. So I'm going to say SSH add /home /Sahil Malik .ssh / what was it? ID ed 25519. So remember to provide the correct file name. If you've chosen a different file name, make sure that you provide that. Hit enter. Okay, identity added. So far so good. Let's hit exit here. Now let's go back to the other terminal window where we were in this folder. What are the files we see here? Now I'm going to show you a little secret. Now when I show you this secret, that's obviously, if you were to steal this secret, you'll be able to impersonate me. I don't want you to do that. So let me say this in advance, that after I have set up everything, I am going to remove these settings. So this is not going to work if you copy paste my key, because I don't want you to impersonate as me, but I'm going to show you the secret anyway. So I'm going to say cat tilde. Actually, I'm in the SSH directory anyway, so don't need to do that. So cat id dot pub, okay? And that's the magic string we're interested in. So go ahead and copy paste it. Control Shift C, here we go. Now go to your GitHub area, and here click on settings. Okay, go to SSH and GPG keys. Choose to add a new SSH key. Give it a name. I'm going to call it temp because I'm going to delete this after you watch this. And I'm going to go ahead and add this, and I'm going to say add SSH key. Actually, you need this entire string. Copy. New SSH key. I'm going to call it temp. Paste. Bingo. Now, while you're watching this, I want to assure you that I'm going to delete this. So delete. And I'm going to repeat this setup without showing you the key. So that way you don't have access to my key. So I'll catch you soon. So you've set up SSH, but how do you know your setup is correct and it's working? You can, of course, attempt to push, and if that fails, maybe that's the issue. But there could be other reasons why pushes can fail. But if you wanted to just do a basic test of SSH, whether your SSH setup is correct or not, how do you do that? So while you were not watching, I went ahead and set up a new SSH key, one that you don't have. So I can authenticate myself, but you can't authenticate you as me. So I went ahead and set up a new SSH key. The question is, how can we test it? So let's go back to terminal, and I don't need to be in my Git repo for this. So in order for me to test this, I'm going to run a command called ssh-t git@github.com. And I'm going to hit enter. So it'll say that this authenticity cannot be established. Don't worry, that's okay. But what you need to do is that you need to verify that this SSH, or rather this warning that you're seeing, this fingerprint that you're seeing is the GitHub's RSA public key fingerprint. And you can actually verify that by going here. So let's go to this new link here. And you go over here and you should be able to see and match this with what you see over here. Basically, it's telling you that, hey, do you trust this remote location? In my case, it seems to match. So I am going to say, yes, this is okay. So it says, hi, Malik Sahil test, you successfully authenticated. But GitHub does not provide shell access. That's okay. We're not trying to SSH into Git, but we've just verified that my local SSH key can be used to authenticate to Git. So at this point, I'm all set up to work with Git on my local machine, and using the SSH key that I've set up, I can authenticate myself to GitHub. So let's start using this. So all my setup is now done. How do I push code to the cloud? Let's see how. So I have a Git repo on my local machine. One user setup. It's not very useful. I want to be able to collaborate with other developers. I wish I had a place I could, share this online somewhere so we could work on it collaboratively. Well, obviously one such place is GitHub, which is what I've set up my authentication for. But let me just say that there are other players here as well. So you are welcome to use other source control providers as long as they support the Git protocol, which is like Bitbucket supports it or Azure DevOps supports it. So you're welcome to use those. Okay, so I am going to create a new repo for myself. Click this plus button here after you've logged in. Click on new repository and give your repository a name. As long as it's unique, that should be okay. You can choose to make it public or private. It's amazing that they give us all this for free, right? And then you can choose to add a README or not. I'll just go with everything unchecked, a blank repo, and I'm going to say create repository. Now, it says that I can either use HTTPS or SSH. Now, I'm going to use SSH because this is how I'm going to authenticate. So I will use SSH. Remember, I went through the entire process of setting up an SSH key. So that's what I'll use. And I have two choices here. Either I can choose to create a new repo from command line. That's fine, we could do that. Or I can choose to push an existing repo from command line. Now I already have an existing repo. So that's what I'll go with. And it tells me exactly the commands I need to execute to be able to push an existing repo from command line. Now, there are three commands here. What's going on here? First is git remote add origin, blah, blah, blah. Ooh, let's unpack this a little bit. What does this mean? So basically, git remote is a command that lets me manage tracked remote repositories. So by saying git remote add, I am basically saying that I want to add a remote tracked repository. Easy? Okay. The origin keyword is special. It indicates where the project was cloned from, but we didn't really clone it from there. That's okay. Think of it from the next person's point of view. The next time you execute a command, where did we clone it from? What is the location that we're getting this stuff from? That would be this location here. So let's go ahead and set up our remote first. So copy this, go to terminal, and go ahead and run this. Okay, that's good. You can verify this like this, git remote v. Okay, this is good. Now let's go back here. Next, we need to say which is our main branch. Okay, let's go ahead and run that. All right, and the next, we need to push. So our changes, we need to send it over the wire into the cloud, into this Git repo here. Let's go over here. Let's go ahead and hit paste, hit enter. Wow. Now, something interesting just happened here. See, let's go back here, hit refresh. My code, readme.md, which is the file being shown over here, this stuff just made it into the cloud. That is amazing. Now, how exactly did this work? Well, it's actually quite cool. What happened over here is when I executed git push -u remote or git push -u origin main, it basically authenticated me using that SSH key. The SSH agent provided that key, and this code was pushed into the cloud for me, right? This is how now we can start working collaboratively with other developers. Okay, so we've got a repo setup. We've got a nice editor called VS Code. VS Code itself has got great Git integration. So let's see how VS Code can be used to work with Git repos. So I have a Git repo connected to an online location, which is over here, right? Now let's start making some code changes here. Well, first let me show you the easy way, and then we're going to get it more and more complicated as we go. So first let's open this in VS Code. Now VS Code itself offers you a lot of interesting Git integration. So internally what VS Code does is that it will just work with Git as it is configured on your machine, Git command line, and it is executing Git commands behind the scenes, is parsing the output, and is showing you exactly how things are working. So I have a file over here. I'm going to say some more changes, okay? And as soon as I do that, notice what happens. Right inside of VS Code, it tells me this file is modified. Right over here, it tells me that these are my changes, right? And then I can choose to stage the changes right through VS Code, like that. And I can choose to give it a message. Let's make this slightly bigger. So Control Enter to commit on main. Some more changes. I'm going to hit Control Enter. Sync changes. And it'll push and pull commits. I'm going to say OK. And that's it. I mean, this was easy, right? So let's go back here, hit refresh. My changes are in the cloud. This really couldn't be any easier. And again, if you look at the file, my file is now modified. If I was to go into terminal and I type git log, now I have 2 changes. This is easy. So this is how we can use VS Code to start making changes right through Visual Studio Code's interface, and Visual Studio also has got similar UI if that's what you prefer. Many other dev tools do, and you can start working with your Git repo like this. Well, certainly you can use GUI-based tools like VS Code and others to work with Git. Chances are over time you will start doing this in terminal. So how to use terminal to do basic things like pushing changes? So I have a repo inside of GitHub, and I have a local repo that is that the GitHub repo is the remote for, and I have this open in VS Code. So what I'm going to do now is that take this a little bit further and see what VS Code gives me and how I can work with it from command line as well. So as you see over here, it gives me some interesting tooltips over here, which is nice. So while you are not watching, I went ahead and installed an extension called Git Lens. I personally really like this extension. If you're going to use VS Code with Git a lot, I recommend you install this. So I went ahead and installed this. And right through VS Code, I'm seeing that it is giving me some interesting information. Like it is saying, hey, this was the change I did 8 minutes ago, and so on and so forth. So this is nice. This is one author over here. Shows me a little history. This is amazing, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to open this readme.md one more time, and I'm going to make a few more changes. So I'm going to say even more changes. So what did I just do? I modified this file. Let's also go ahead and add a new file. So new file.md, and I'm going to say some content inside of new file like that. hit close, and let's leave it here. Of course, you can delete files as well. Now this is really, really nice because see right here, I can hover over this. It tells me the green means that this is a new line that I've added over here. Isn't that nice? You can choose to play with this. You can choose to delete lines, for example, and see what it looks like. Right? This is really, really nice. This is getting really, really powerful. Now, the new file.md doesn't show me any of this stuff. Why? Because this file is not being tracked right now. So what I need to do is that I need to start tracking this file. Now there are many ways to do so, and I am going to do this from terminal, command line. How do we do that? Let's go to terminal. I'm going to hit enter, and it tells me, see this color changed, which means there are changes here we need to worry about. So I'm going to say git status to see what changes we have. It says this particular file was modified and this file was added. Okay, let's go ahead and stage these changes. Git add dot. Okay, these changes are now staged. Nice. Let's go back to VS Code. Now VS Code should pick this for me. So see, it tells me that I've got two staged changes over here. A for added, M for modified. And now it shows me that this, see this color here is telling me that this is a new file that has been added. Okay, that's nice. Let's go to my file view, A for added, M for modified, D for deleted if you had any. And now instead of committing it from VS Code, I'm going to say from terminal git commit -m, let's give it a message. I'm going to say second commit, hit enter. Now I go back to the cloud. I'm going to hit refresh. Why are my changes not showing over here? Well, here is why. When I say commit, I have committed locally. See, this is the thing about Git. I have a local Git repo that has this version history. I never sent this to the cloud. So for me to send this to the cloud, the remote, I have to execute yet another command called git push. Now these changes have gone to the cloud. Let's go back here, hit refresh. Now my changes are in the cloud. So this is how, now we're going further into seeing like what VS Code gives me from an integration perspective, and what other tools give you as well. You're welcome to try those as well. Git will periodically refresh this, and you should be able to see these changes. It's not reflecting it right now, but it'll periodically do a git fetch, and it'll get those changes eventually. But this is how VS Code can work with terminal, and as you start running more and more of this, you'll get more and more familiarized with this. So I must confess, I've been showing you a bad practice so far by editing code directly in the main branch. Typically speaking, Git has this very powerful concept called branching, and the changes should be done in an alternate branch, and then those changes get merged into the main branch. So how do you use branches with Git? Let's find out. Okay, we're making very good progress here, but there is one thing I'd like to tell you, and that is that I've been showing you a bad practice. I've been making these changes directly on the main branch. That is considered a bad practice. What you're supposed to do in a real project is that you would typically go and create a new issue, and then you would create a branch associated with that issue, and then you would merge those changes from that branch into the main branch. And then you would have people review stuff before things get merged. Now, I'm not going to worry about issue just yet, but at least we should learn about branches first. So let's dive into branches. First, the idea here is that I am on the main branch and I want to create a new branch. And I want to make further changes, but I will do so in the new branch. So let's create a new branch. Git branch new change. So that's the name of my branch, new change. So we just created a new branch. And now I want to sort of move over to the new branch because I want to make changes in the new branch. I'm going to say git checkout new change, like that. Notice it changed over here, right? So it tells me exactly what branch I'm on. This is nice. Now, these two commands, technically speaking, I could have just abbreviated them with one command like this, but you can do that, certainly. That would create a branch and checkout in one single command, but I'm already on this branch, so I'll just continue. Now let me go to VS Code and start making some changes. Now VS Code is trying to read stuff from the same location, and it already knows that I have switched over to the new change branch. So let's start making some changes. So in this new change branch, I'm going to say yet more changes in the readme.md, and let me go ahead and create a third file. And let's add some content here like this. And in a real world project, you've been making these changes in this new branch, and at some point you say, okay, this looks good. Now I wish to be able to commit these changes. So let's do it from terminal. So here, if I hit enter, it tells me that there are some unstaged changes here. I'm going to say git status. It tells me that this is the status. And so I have a new file that has been added, third file.md. It's untracked right now, and a file has been modified, which is readme.md. Okay, nice. And I'm going to say git add dot to stage these changes. And I'm going to say git commit m, third commit, to commit these changes. Now, if you saw my last video, you know that these changes are committed locally. They have not been sent anywhere to the cloud. In fact, they have been committed only to this branch. What do we mean by that? Well, let me try doing a git push, because that's typically what I did in the main, right? So I'm going to hit git push, and this fails. Well, why did it fail? Well, it failed because this new branch that I have created, this new branch is not in the cloud yet. And we have not told this new branch where to push it to. See, it would be wrong for me to push this into main, right? So that is why it is telling me this error message. That makes sense. But let me show you something interesting. I'm going to say cat readme.md. This yet more changes is what I added over here. At any point, I can say git checkout main, okay? And I'm going to say cat readme.md. And now I don't see those changes that were in that branch, right? This is the beauty of branches. That now I can switch between versions of my source code, right? And a lot of other snapshots of my source code. So I've effectively branched them. And now at any point, I can say git checkout new change, cat readme.md, and now I see those new changes, right? So this is the beauty, that I'm maintaining snapshots of my code locally. That is wonderful. Anyway, so I said git push, and obviously this failed, but it tells me what I need to do for it to succeed. Before I run that, let's go over here and notice online it says that my repo has got one branch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say git push set upstream origin new change and hit enter. Now what it did is that it added a new origin, set the upstream for my new branch, and it pushed those changes only to my new branch. Actually, check this out. Git has now detected that a new branch has shown up, and now I can choose to compare the new branch with the main branch, and I can choose to merge them if I so choose to do so. Now, there are two ways of doing this. Either I can merge these changes locally. So let me show you how you would do that. Git merge new change main. I'm not going to do this because this is a simpler way of doing it and you can try this yourself. So I'm going to say git merge new change main. And this would merge my changes from new change into main locally. And then I can check out main and I can push the main branch. That's definitely valid. You can do that. But what I'm going to do is that I want to show you how this pull request stuff works. Now I have some code sitting in a branch. How do I merge? What is a pull request? Let's see. So at this point I have a repo with two branches. And I have made some changes in the new change branch and I've pushed that into the cloud. GitHub is smart enough to see that some new changes have shown up over here. And these new changes, it is prompting me to compare and create a pull request. So let's click on this and follow the rabbit hole and see what it tells me. What is a pull request? A pull request is basically saying that I, the developer, I have made some changes to new change, and I want those changes to be merged into the main branch. And the thought over here is that I can choose to add reviewers, and people can comment on the code. So I'm going to say these are some awesome changes. So this is some helpful information to reviewers, and I'm going to go ahead and create a pull request. Here you go. So I've created a pull request here as you see, and now some other reviewer, ideally, so I shouldn't be reviewing my own code, that makes sense, right? So some other reviewer would come in here and would review my code. Now, let's assume I am that some other reviewer. So that some other reviewer can go through this pull request and they can look at the commits that were made. So in this pull request, we've got one commit and we've got two files that have been changed. And these two files, I can see that these are the changes that have been made. So this even more changes line has been removed and added. And this fourth line is new. Okay? So I'm going to say nice change. Okay? So now people can start making these review comments. They can collaborate on this. Life is good, right? And I'm going to say finish my review. And I'm going to say comment. You can either comment or approve or request changes. So I'll just say comment. Now, somebody who has the right permissions, and in this case, the logged in user does have the right permissions, that user can choose to merge this pull request. So I'm going to go ahead and merge this pull request by clicking this button. I'm basically saying that whatever was there in the new changes branch now will be merged with the main branch. So I'm going to say merge, confirm merge, and it says that this pull request was successfully merged and closed. So at this point, whatever changes were made in the new change branch are now part of the main branch as well. So I can choose to delete this branch if I wish. If I leave it there, that's fine. But yeah, in the long run, you should, trim this and delete this. But locally, now imagine I'm another developer and I want to get these changes onto my machine. So I'm going to say git checkout main, and I'm going to say cat readme.md. Okay, so see that yet more changes line, which is what was there in the new change branch, is not on my machine yet. But if I was to go to GitHub, let's open this in a new tab. So github.com. and let's go to this repo. And if I look at the main branch, as you see over here, the yet more changes is there in the cloud because I did this merge with the pull request entirely in the cloud. So how do I get those changes back to my local machine? Here is how. I simply say git pull. That's it. And it will tell me exactly what it did in the git pull. Basically, it says that it made such and such changes, and it tells you exactly the nature of the changes. So readme.md had got 2 additions, 1 deletion, and so on and so forth. Now, if I do cat readme.md, this yet more changes does show up here. Now, at this point, all the other developers in my team can do a git pull, and they can get these changes on their local machine. They can also do a git pull on my branch if they want it. So imagine that if I'm working on a feature and I'm stuck, like there's some error and some other developer on my team wishes to repro that on their machine, they can just do a git fetch, git pull, and then they can choose to check out that branch, right? So that is the beauty of this. So now I can choose to go into this other branch, this new change branch, and this new change branch, because this has been merged completely, I can choose to delete this branch from the cloud. How do I do that? So right here, it tells me after the pull request has been successfully merged and closed, I can choose to delete the branch from here, or I can go to branches, and it says that this branch is merged, so it gives me a little delete button next to it, and I can choose to hit this delete button, and this branch has now been deleted from the cloud. And this is how pull requests, branches, and merging works together. So I hope you found this little overview of Git useful, and I hope you gained some value out of it. Thank you for watching, and stay in touch.
Thanks, Sahil. I'll remind you that we're very interested in your feedback about this webinar and would appreciate you taking a moment or two to complete our survey. It's all of 12 questions, so you'll fly right through it, and one lucky attendee will receive a $100 Amazon e-card. Mark your calendar for Wednesday, March 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern for our next Code Presents webinar, Best Practices for Optimizing Power BI and DAX Modeling, presented by code author Helen Wall and Andy Clark. Join us on April 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern for Making VS Code Your Own, presented by code author John Peterson. Just a reminder that as a benefit for registering for this webinar, all registered attendees who don't already subscribe will automatically receive a free digital Code magazine subscription. Please share this free subscription link with others who could make it to the webinar. Code Consulting is hiring React developers. Come join the Code Consulting team. We have multiple junior and senior React positions currently open, remote and on-site. Full-time and contractor positions are available. Follow the link for more details. Through our free hour of code offer, you can ask for our help on whatever you or your team needs. No strings, no commitment, no credit card required, just help from our code experts. Reach out to me about scheduling your free hour of code. Just a reminder that the Code mobile app is available for both iOS and Android. It's the ideal way to read Code Magazine on the go. A free Code Magazine subscription is also available as a Microsoft benefit. Visual Studio subscription customers and Dev Essentials members qualify for a free Code Magazine subscription. That's it for today's presentation. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're attending live, we will be in the chat for a while answering as many questions as possible. If you're watching the post-event recording, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or through any of our communications channels. Thanks for attending, everyone. Have a great rest of the day or night, wherever you are.